My 18th birthday was supposed to be just cheap cake and awkward well wishes, until Dad slammed a DNA kit onto the table like a verdict. He pointed right in my face, swore he was not raising another man's kid, and kicked me out that very night. I thought I had lost everything, but I had actually escaped my cage. When he tried to crush me again later, he saw my true net worth and collapsed right on the spot. My name is Beatrice Halston, and if you had looked through the window of our dining room in Hawthorne Falls that night, you would have seen what looked like a perfectly normal family celebrating a milestone. There was a sheet cake from the grocery store sitting in the center of the table, its frosting a violent shade of synthetic pink that made my teeth ache just looking at it. There were 4 balloons tethered to the back of my chair, bobbing listlessly in the draft that always seeped through the kitchen window. There was my mother, Dana, nervously smoothing the tablecloth, and my brother, Grayson, scrolling through his phone with the bored detachment of someone who had better places to be. And then there was my father, Frank Halston. It was my 18th birthday. In most families, this is the night the parents get sentimental. They talk about how fast the time has gone, or they joke about you finally being an adult who can vote or buy a lottery ticket. But in the Halston house, the air did not smell like vanilla cake or melting wax candles. It smelled like ozone, the sharp, metallic scent that fills the atmosphere right before a lightning strike. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the 18 candles flickering on the cake. No one had told me to blow them out yet. The silence stretched so tight, I felt like if I moved, I would snap a tendon. Frank was not looking at me. He was looking at my mother. He was staring at her with a kind of predatory patience, his fork resting unused beside his plate. It was the look of a man who had been holding his breath for a very long time and was finally about to exhale. Frank checked his watch. The digital numbers must have rolled over to a specific time he had set in his mind, because he suddenly sat back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Well," Frank said. His voice was too loud for the small room. "That is it then. You are legal." I looked up, forcing a smile that felt like it was stapled to my face. "Thanks, Dad. Can we cut the cake now?" Frank did not answer. Instead, he reached under the table. When his hand came back up, he did not produce a gift wrapped in shiny paper. He slammed a thick manila envelope onto the table. It hit the wood with a heavy, flat sound that made the silverware jump. Beside it, he tossed a small, rectangular box. I recognized the branding immediately. It was one of those commercial DNA testing kits you can buy at any pharmacy for $99. The plastic wrap on the box had already been torn open. "I have been waiting for this day," Frank said, his voice dropping to a low, trembling growl. "I have waited 18 years, 3 months, and 12 days. I counted. I did the math every single morning when I woke up and looked at your face." My mother let out a small, strangled sound, like a bird flying into a window. She reached out a shaking hand toward him. "Frank, please, not tonight. Let's just eat the cake." He swatted her hand away without even looking at her. His eyes were locked on me now. They were cold, devoid of any warmth or fatherly affection. It was like looking into the eyes of a stranger who hated me for simply existing. "Stop lying, Dana," he spat. He pushed the DNA kit across the table until it hit my plate. "Go ahead. Open it. Read the results." I already did. I looked at the box, then at the envelope, then at him. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they could hear it. "Dad, what is this?" "I am not your dad," he said. The words were precise, practiced. He had rehearsed this. "And I am done pretending. I stood by. I paid the bills. I put food in your mouth because the law said I had to support the child born in my marriage. But you are 18 now. Beatrice, the clock just ran out." He stood up, looming over the table. He pointed a finger directly at my face, his skin flushed with a mixture of rage and triumph. I knew she was cheating on me back then. Everyone said I was crazy, but I knew, and now I have the proof. 0% match. You hear me, 0. I turned to my mother. I needed her to laugh. I needed her to tell him he was being ridiculous, that this was some sick joke, or that he had misunderstood the paperwork. But Dana did not laugh. She did not yell at him to stop. She just shrank into her chair, her face burying itself in her hands. She was trembling. "Dana," I whispered. "Mom, don't make a scene. Beatrice," she mumbled into her palms. Her voice was thin and watery. "Just listen to him. Please, just don't make it worse." That was the moment the floor dropped out from under me. It was not Frank's anger that broke me. It was her resignation. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't fighting back. This wasn't a sudden explosion of temper. This was a script. They had discussed this. They knew this moment was coming. Frank had been counting down the days on a calendar, and Dana had just been praying the explosion wouldn't be too loud. I looked across the table at Grayson. My brother was 3 years older than me, the golden boy who could do no wrong. He was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't shocked. He was smirking. It was a small, nasty little curl of his lip, the expression of someone who is finally watching the underdog get kicked out of the tournament. "Finally," Grayson muttered, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "I told you he was going to do it eventually." "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely a squeak. "You all knew." Frank didn't give me time to process the betrayal. He grabbed the back of my chair and jerked it, forcing me to stand up. "I want you out," he said. "Right now. Tonight." "It is 10 o'clock at night," I stammered, looking at the dark window. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," Frank said. "That is not my problem anymore. I am not raising another man's kid for 1 second longer than the law requires. You are an adult. Figure it out." He marched out of the dining room and stomped down the hall toward my bedroom. I stood frozen for a second, looking at the unlit candles on the cake. "Happy birthday, Beatrice." I heard the sound of crashing from my room drawers being ripped open. Things being thrown. The sound snapped me back to reality. I ran down the hall, my mother's sobbing fading behind me. In my room, Frank was tearing clothes off hangers and shoving them into an old, beat-up suitcase that smelled like mildew. He wasn't packing. He was purging. He grabbed my favorite sweater, the blue one I had saved up for months to buy, and wadded it up like garbage before jamming it into the corner of the bag. "Frank, stop." I grabbed his arm. "You can't just kick me out. I live here." He spun around and shoved me back. I stumbled, hitting my shoulder against the door frame. "It is my house," he snarled. "My name is on the deed. Not yours. Never yours. You have 10 minutes to get whatever trash you can carry and get out of my sight." He threw a few more things into the bag, my school textbooks, a pair of sneakers, a handful of socks, and then zipped it shut with a violent yank. He tossed the suitcase toward me. It slid across the floor and hit my feet. "Go," he commanded. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized there was no negotiation here. This wasn't a punishment for a bad grade or a curfew violation. This was an eviction. He was erasing me. "I need my papers," I said, my voice shaking, but clearer than before. "My birth certificate, my social security card. I can't get a job or an apartment without them." Frank's eyes darted to the tall dresser in the corner, the one where they kept the important family documents in a locked tin box. He moved his body slightly, blocking my line of sight to it. "You don't need anything from this house," he said. "Those are my legal documents," I insisted. I stepped around the suitcase. "Give them to me, and I will leave." He hesitated. For a split second, I saw panic flicker behind the rage. Why would he panic? He was the one in power. He was the one holding all the cards. He walked over to the dresser, his back stiff. He opened the top drawer and rummaged around. I watched him in the reflection of the mirror on the wall. He wasn't just looking for my ID. His hand moved quickly, snatching up a long, white business envelope that was sitting on top of the tin box. It looked official, thick and heavy, with a return address embossed in black ink. I couldn't read the whole thing, but I saw the words legal and trust. Frank shoved that envelope deep into the back pocket of his jeans. Then he grabbed my social security card and my birth certificate from the tin box and turned around, his face a mask of stone. He thrust the ID cards at me. "Take them," he said. "Now get out." "What was that letter?" I asked. The question hung in the air. Sharp and dangerous. Frank froze. "What letter?" "The one you just put in your pocket," I said. "I saw you." "Is that mine?" He stepped forward, invading my personal space until I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You are imagining things, just like your mother imagines she is a faithful wife. Get out, Beatrice, before I call the cops and have you removed for trespassing." He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the front door. I stumbled, clutching my suitcase with one hand and my papers with the other. He didn't let me say goodbye to Dana. He didn't let me grab my coat. He marched me through the living room, past the dining room where the pink cake still sat untouched, and shoved me out onto the porch. The night air in Hawthorne Falls was brutal. It was late October, and the wind had teeth. It bit through my thin shirt immediately. I heard the lock click decisively behind me. Then the deadbolt slid home with a heavy thud. I stood there on the concrete steps, shivering. Through the front window, I saw Frank walk back into the dining room. He didn't look remorseful. He didn't look sad. He looked relieved. He picked up the DNA kit from the table and threw it into the trash can. Then he said something to Grayson, and my brother laughed. I looked down at the suitcase by my feet. It contained maybe 20% of everything I owned. I had no car. I had $40 in my wallet. I had nowhere to sleep. But as the cold seeped into my bones, my mind kept going back to that reflection in the mirror. The way Frank had hidden that letter, the urgency of it. If he just wanted me gone because he hated my existence, why hide a letter if I was nothing to him? Why was he afraid of me seeing a piece of paper? I remembered the logo on the envelope. It had a scale of justice on it. They weren't just kicking me out because of where I came from. That was the excuse. That was the cover story. You don't hide things from a person you are throwing away unless that person has something you want to keep. Frank Halston thought he had just discarded a burden. He thought he had thrown out the trash. I gripped the handle of my suitcase, my knuckles turning white. I took one last look at the house that had never really been a home. "You should have let me eat the cake, Frank," I whispered to the cold wind. I turned my back on the door and walked down the driveway into the darkness. I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. I didn't know how I was going to survive tomorrow, but I knew one thing for certain. I was coming back for that letter. The windshield of the Honda Civic was frosted over on the inside, a spiderweb of ice clinging to the glass where my breath had condensed during the night. I woke up curled in the back seat of my best friend's car, my knees pulled up to my chest to preserve whatever body heat I had left. My neck was stiff, locked in a painful angle against the door handle, and my stomach felt like it had been hollowed out with a scoop. I had walked 3 miles to Kara Whitman's house after leaving my own driveway, but I could not bring myself to ring the doorbell at midnight. Her parents were the kind of people who asked too many questions, and I did not have a single answer that would not sound like a lie. So, I had found the spare key under the rock in the flower bed, unlocked her car, and passed out. It was 6 a.m. The sun was just starting to bleed gray light over the rooftops of Hawthorne Falls. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and immediately reached for the folder I had guarded with my life the night before. I needed to see my name on an official paper. I needed to know I existed legally, even if I did not exist to my father anymore. I opened the manila folder. My heart stopped. In the dim light, I saw the birth certificate. It was a photocopy, a black and white, grainy duplicate with the word "copy" stamped diagonally across it in faint gray ink. I frantically flipped it over, shaking the folder upside down. The Social Security card was not there. The slot in the plastic sleeve where it usually sat was empty. Frank. He had handed me the folder. He had made a show of giving me my documents. But in that split second between the drawer and my hand, or maybe hours before when he planned this whole eviction, he had stripped the originals. He had given me useless paper. I was 18 years old, homeless, and technically unidentified. I shoved the folder into my bag and slipped out of the car. I used the spare key to let myself into Kara's house, moving like a ghost through the kitchen. I found Kara asleep in her room, mouth open, drooling on her pillow. I shook her shoulder. When she saw me red-eyed, shivering, wearing the same clothes from the night before, she did not ask why I was there. She just scooted over and pulled the duvet up. "Bathroom is yours," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "My parents leave for work at 7:30. We can talk then." I took the hottest shower of my life, scrubbing until my skin was raw, trying to wash off the feeling of being discarded. I borrowed a pair of Kara's jeans and a thick flannel shirt. By the time her parents left, I looked like a human being again, even if I felt like a hollow shell. I did not stay long. I could not. I had $40. And $40 in Hawthorne Falls would last me exactly 2 days if I did not eat. I needed money, and I needed it immediately. My first stop was the bank downtown. I walked up to the teller, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who had known me since I was in kindergarten. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I need to make a withdrawal," I said. "From my teen savings account." Mrs. Gable smiled, typed my name into her computer, and then her smile faltered. She frowned, tapping the enter key a few times as if the machine was making a mistake. "Beatrice, honey," she said, lowering her voice. "The account is closed." Closed. I gripped the edge of the counter. I didn't close it. I have been saving my babysitting money there for 3 years. There was over $2,000. "It was a custodial account," she explained gently. "Frank was the custodian. The system shows the funds were transferred out and the account was closed yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. 7 hours before he threw the DNA kit on the table. He had drained me dry before I even blew out the candles. "Can I see where it went?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I am sorry," she said. "Since the account is closed and you were a minor at the time of the transaction, I cannot give you the statement without the custodian's permission." I walked out of the bank into the blinding sunlight, feeling nauseous. He had taken everything. It was not just about kicking me out. It was about ensuring I failed. He wanted me to crawl back, or maybe he just wanted me to disappear into the gutter so he never had to look at his mistake again. I found a payphone outside the grocery store. I did not want to use Kara's cell phone and leave a trail. I dialed the house landline. It rang 4 times. Then Frank picked up. "Hello? I want my papers." "Frank?" I said. I did not call him Dad. "You gave me photocopies. I need the originals, and I want my $2,000. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and cold. "You have no money," Frank said flatly. "That was reimbursement for 18 years of room and board. As for the papers, I don't know what you're talking about. You took the folder." "Frank, please, I can't get a job without—" "Don't come back," he said. The line went dead. I stood there gripping the receiver until the plastic creaked. I wanted to scream, to smash the phone against the booth, but that would cost money I did not have. I hung up and walked. I ended up at the Ridgeway Diner on the edge of town. It was a greasy spoon that smelled permanently of bacon fat and stale coffee, the kind of place where truckers and third-shift factory workers ate breakfast at 2 in the afternoon. They had a help wanted sign taped to the glass with duct tape. The manager, a guy named Al with sweat stains on his collar, looked at me skeptically. "I need a dishwasher," he said, chewing on a toothpick. "Night shift, 7 to 3 in the morning, minimum wage, cash." "I will take it," I said. "You got an ID?" "I lost my wallet," I lied, keeping my face smooth. "I am waiting on replacements, but I can start tonight. I work hard." Al looked at my desperate eyes and shrugged. "Fine. You break a plate, you pay for it. Cash under the table until you bring me a Social Security card." I started that night. For 8 hours. I stood in a cloud of steam, scraping half-eaten eggs and soggy toast into a trash can. My hands turned pruny and red, the hot water scalding my skin. My back ached from leaning over the deep industrial sink, but every time I scrubbed a plate, I imagined I was scrubbing away my connection to the Halston name. Around 2 in the morning, the diner quieted down. A man in a gray jumpsuit sat at the counter, nursing a black coffee. He had been watching me haul a bus tub of heavy dishes, He looked like he was made of beef jerky and steel wire. His hands stained with oil that no soap could ever remove. "You got strong arms, kid," he said as I wiped down the counter near him. I paused, defensive. "I am doing my job." "Relax," he grunted. "I ain't hitting on you. I work over at Blue Crest Fabrication, the metal shop down on River Road. We just fired our cleanup kid because he spent more time on TikTok than sweeping swarf." "Swarf?" I asked. "Metal shavings," he said. "Nasty stuff. Get in your boots. Cuts you up if you are stupid." The boss, Ro, needs someone who doesn't mind getting dirty. Pays better than Al does. I looked at the greasy water in my sink, then at the man. "Does she pay cash?" "She pays for work," he said. "Show up at 6. Tell her Miller sent you." I did not sleep after my shift. I walked straight from the diner to the industrial park, arriving at Blue Crest just as the sun was coming up. The building was a corrugated metal beast that hummed with electricity. Inside, it sounded like a war zone, the shriek of grinders against steel, the crackle of welding arcs, the thud of heavy machinery. I found the office. A woman was sitting behind a desk buried under blueprints. She looked up as I entered. She was terrifying. She had short, steel-gray hair cut with military precision and a scar running from her jawline down her neck. She wore a welding jacket and heavy boots. "You must be the stray Miller found," she said. Her voice was like gravel in a mixer. "I am Beatrice," I said, standing tall. "I need a job." She stood up and walked around the desk. She was smaller than I expected, but she moved with a density that made her seem massive. She looked at my hands, raw from the dishwater. "Soft hands," she noted. "They work," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "This isn't a playground. You mess up here. You don't break a plate. You lose a finger, or you burn the building down. I don't have time to babysit." "I don't need a babysitter," I said. "I need money. Tell me what to do." Rose stared at me for a long 10 seconds. She was testing me, looking for the flinch. I did not flinch. I had stared down Frank Halston. I could stare down a welder. "Grab a broom," she said, pointing to the shop floor. "Sort the scrap bin. Aluminum in the blue bin, steel in the red. If you mix them up, the recycler finds me, and I take it out of your pay. $10 an hour. You get a hot meal if you stay past 6. I worked until my muscles screamed. I swept razor-sharp curls of metal from the concrete. I hauled heavy pieces of scrap, my unaccustomed fingers slipping on the oil. I learned quickly that steel smells like blood when you cut it. By the end of the day, I was covered in gray dust, my face smeared with grime. Ro came over to inspect the bins. She picked up a piece of aluminum I had tossed in the red bin. My stomach dropped. She looked at it, then tossed it into the correct blue bin. "One mistake," she said. "Not bad for a greenhorn." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. She peeled off $80 and handed it to me. "Come back tomorrow," she said, "and get some steel-toed boots. You drop a beam on those sneakers, you will never walk right again." I took the money. It felt heavier than the thousands Frank had stolen. This was mine. I walked back to Kara's house that evening, exhausted but wired. I sat in her driveway again, but this time I pulled out a small spiral notebook I had bought at the drugstore with my diner tips. I opened the first page and wrote the date. October 25th. Frank kicked me out. Documents stolen. Teen savings account drained. $2,140. Frank knows I am not his. He planned this. I stared at the page. I needed to document everything, every interaction, every theft, because that letter Frank hid the one with the scales of justice meant there was something bigger happening. He wasn't just reacting, he was maneuvering. My cheap prepaid phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped. It was a number I did not recognize, with an area code from the state capital. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Is this Beatrice Halston?" A woman's voice, professional, crisp. "Who is asking?" I said, my guard instantly up. "My name is Sarah, and I'm calling from Harrington and Vale Legal Associates," the woman said. We have been trying to reach you by mail for 3 months regarding a matter of urgency. We received a notification that your address might have changed recently. My blood ran cold. Harrington and Vale. That was the name on the envelope Frank had shoved into his pocket. What is this about? I asked. We need to verify your identity to proceed, she said. We have a mandate to execute a trust provision that was triggered upon your 18th birthday. However, we have had some conflicting communication from Mr. Frank Halston regarding your status. Conflicting how? I asked, gripping the phone tight. He informed us that you were incapacitated, she said, and that he would be acting as your proxy. The world tilted on its axis. Incapacitated. He had told them I was mentally unfit or physically unable to speak for myself. He wasn't just stealing my money, he was stealing my voice. I am not incapacitated, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so hot it burned my throat. I am perfectly fine. In that case, Miss Halston, the woman said, we need you to come to our office immediately and bring your identification. I looked down at my empty hands, at the notebook where I had written documents stolen. I started, but the words stuck. I didn't have an ID. Frank knew that. He had taken my ID, so I couldn't prove who I was to these people. It was a trap, a perfect, circular trap. Miss Halston, I will be there, I said, and hung up. I sat alone in the dark car, the silence of the suburbs pressing in on me. The game had just changed. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for my identity, and I was going to need a lot more than a dishwasher's wage to win. The lobby of Harrington and Vale Legal Associates smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. It was a stark contrast to the metallic tang of the Blue Crest fabrication shop, where I had spent the last 8 hours sweeping steel filings. I had scrubbed my hands with industrial pumice soap until they were raw, but I still felt grimy standing on the polished marble floor. I approached the reception desk, my heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The receptionist did not look up immediately. She finished typing a sentence, hit enter with a flourish, and then raised her eyebrows at me. I am here to see Sarah, I said, keeping my voice level. She called me. My name is Beatrice Halston. The receptionist tapped her keyboard. Her face remained blank. She asked for my identification. I swallowed hard. This was the wall I had been dreading. I explained that my identification had been stolen and that I was in the process of replacing it. But Sarah had called me regarding an urgent matter about a trust. The woman stopped typing. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional dismissal. She told me that without government-issued photo identification, she could not even confirm that I was who I said I was. She informed me that they had sent certified letters to the address on file for months. I told her I never received them. She nodded as if she had heard this excuse 1,000 times. She said that security protocols were strict. She advised me to return when I had my papers. Then she turned back to her computer, effectively dismissing me. I walked out of the building, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind me with a decisive click. The visit had been a failure on the surface, but it confirmed a vital piece of the puzzle. Frank had not just ignored the mail, he had intercepted it. He had been curating my reality for months, maybe years, filtering out the things that could have given me an exit strategy. I went straight to the public library. I needed a computer, and I needed to see just how deep the damage went. I logged into a free credit monitoring service, my fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard. I had never bothered to check my credit before because I assumed I did not have any. I was 18. My financial footprint should have been 0. It was not 0. There was an inquiry on my file dated 2 days ago. It was an application for a high-limit credit card. The status read, denied. I clicked on the details. The application had been flagged for potential fraud because the applicant failed the security verification questions. Specifically, they had failed to answer the question about the make and model of my first car. I almost laughed out loud in the quiet library. I did not have a car. I never had. Frank had promised to help me buy one for graduation and then claimed money was too tight, but whoever filled out that application had guessed. They had assumed that since I was 18, I must have a vehicle. Frank tried to open a credit line in my name less than 48 hours after kicking me out. I did not hesitate. I navigated to the websites for all 3 major credit bureaus. I initiated a total credit freeze. I set up 2-factor authentication on everything, linking it to my new prepaid burner phone. I changed my email passwords, my social media logins, everything. I built a digital fortress around what little identity I had left. If Frank wanted to use my name to fund his life, he was going to hit a wall of ice. That evening at the shop, Ro found me sitting on a stack of pallets during my break, reading a printout of my employment contract. I was underlining words I did not understand. Ro leaned against a support beam, wiping grease from her hands with a rag. She asked what I was doing. I told her I was making sure I did not sign away my life. Ro nodded approvingly. She sat down opposite me and pointed at a clause about liability. She explained that companies like to bury the dangerous stuff in the middle of the boring paragraphs. She told me to never sign anything when I was hungry, tired, or desperate, because that is when they get you. She looked at me with her sharp, assessing eyes. She told me that paper is the only thing that matters in this world. She said that if you do not have the paper proving who you are and what you own, then you are just a ghost haunting your own life. I took her advice to heart. The next morning, I used the library computer to access the cloud storage of my old phone. I had been locked out of the device itself, but my cloud backup was still active. I scrolled back through 3 years of data until I found what I was looking for. When I was 16, I had taken a screenshot of my bank balance to show Kara how much I had saved from a summer of double shifts babysitting. In the background of that screenshot, visible on the banking app interface, was the account number. I used that number to request a transaction history from the bank's automated system. Since I could not log in, I had to pay a fee to have a physical copy printed at a branch, using my birth certificate copy as weak proof. The teller was reluctant, but I charmed her, playing the confused teenager who lost her password. I sat in the park with the printout. The wind whipped the pages, but I held them down. The account had been drained systematically. $500 on June 12th, $300 on July 4th, $800 on August 1st. I checked the dates against my memory. June 12th was the day my brother Grayson announced he was starting a dropshipping business selling cheap sunglasses. July 4th was when he bought a new gaming console. August 1st was when he crashed his car and needed to pay the deductible before Frank found out. Frank had not just taken the money at the end. He had been using my savings as a slush fund for Grayson's mistakes for years. I had been working nights and weekends to pay for my brother's incompetence. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. Anger was better than sickness. Anger was fuel. Later that afternoon, I met Kara behind the high school bleachers. It felt ridiculous, like a drug deal, but I could not risk being seen near her house. I needed clean clothes, and she had packed a bag for me. As I was changing into a fresh shirt, Kara mentioned something offhandedly. She asked if I remembered that time in 3rd grade when we did the family tree project. I nodded, buttoning the shirt. She said she had been thinking about it. She reminded me that my mother, Dana, used to work as a receptionist at a medical center before she became a full-time housewife. Kara asked if I knew which medical center it was. I shook my head. I had always assumed it was a general practitioner's office. Kara looked at me, her expression serious. She told me her aunt worked there with my mom. She said it was the Hawthorne Fertility and Genetics Clinic. I froze. My fingers stopped on the last button. A fertility clinic. Frank had screamed that he was not raising another man's kid. He made it sound like an affair. He made it sound like a sordid, late-night betrayal in a motel room. But if my mother worked at a fertility clinic, there were other ways for a child to be conceived. Ways that involved doctors, donors, and paperwork. I needed to talk to Dana. I texted her from my burner phone. I told her to meet me at the Save-A-Lot parking lot on the east side of town. It was a rundown area where Frank would never be caught dead. I told her if she did not come, I would walk into Frank's workplace and scream the truth about the stolen money to his boss. She came. I sat in the passenger seat of her car as the rain started to drum against the roof. Dana looked 10 years older than she had 3 days ago. Her eyes were swollen, and her hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. She did not look at me. She stared out at the wet pavement. I asked her simply if she had an affair. She shook her head violently. She started to cry. Silent, racking sobs that shook her small frame. She told me she never cheated. She swore on her life. Then I asked her why the DNA test said 0%. She took a deep breath. A ragged sound in the small car. She told me the truth. She said that Frank had fertility issues. They tried for years to have a second child after Grayson. It never happened. She said Frank was proud. Too proud. He refused to admit it was him. So, they went to the clinic where she worked. They used a donor. I stared at her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Frank had signed off on it. He knew. Dana continued, her voice gaining a desperate speed. She said they agreed never to talk about it. Frank signed the birth certificate. He was my legal father. But over the years, he grew bitter. Every time he looked at me, he saw proof of his own inadequacy. He saw a stranger. I asked her why he did it now. Why wait 18 years to the day Dana turned to me then? And I saw the terror in her eyes. It was not fear of Frank. It was scary for me. She said it was about the money. Frank had made bad investments. He had leveraged the house to bail Grayson out of debt more times than I knew. They were drowning. And then the letter came. I asked her what letter. She said a law firm had contacted them 6 months ago. They were looking for the child of a specific donor. They said there was trust, a legacy. Dana wiped her face with the back of her hand. She said Frank intercepted the mail. He read it. He realized that if I found out about the trust, I would have the means to leave. I would have money, independence, and power. And he would have nothing. She told me that Frank's plan was to break me. He wanted to strip me of my identity, make me homeless, and cut me off from the world. He thought that if I was desperate enough, I would sign anything he put in front of me. He wanted to become my proxy. He wanted to control the trust. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. It was not just greed. It was a calculated demolition of a human being. Dana grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. She whispered that the trust was significant. She did not know the amount, but the letter used words like substantial and protective custody. She told me that Frank was terrified. He had said that if I knew the truth, I would vanish from their reach forever. I looked at my mother. I saw a woman who had been bullied into silence for 2 decades. I pulled my hand away gently. I told her I was not going to vanish. I told her I was going to stay right here. I opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. The water soaked my hair instantly, but I did not care. I had the pieces now. I knew why Frank had hidden the envelope. I knew why he had stolen my ID. I knew why he had kicked me out. He was not discarding trash. He was trying to hijack a gold mine. I watched Dana drive away, her taillights blurring in the mist. I turned and began the long walk back to the shop. I had a lot of work to do. I needed to find out who the donor was. I needed to get into that law firm. And I needed to make sure that when Frank Halston finally reached for the prize he thought he had stolen, he grabbed nothing but air. The phone call that changed the trajectory of my life happened in the break room of Blue Crest Fabrication, surrounded by the smell of burnt coffee and ozone. I was huddled in the corner, pressing my burner phone to my ear, trying to block out the shrieking grind of the angle grinder on the shop floor. "We have rescheduled the verification appointment for Thursday at 10 in the morning," Sarah from Harrington and Vale said. Her voice was as crisp as a fresh banknote. "However, Miss Halston, there has been a development regarding your file security." My hand tightened around the phone. "What kind of development?" "Yesterday afternoon, an individual contacted our firm attempting to access the Hale Halston Trust details," Sarah said. "He identified himself as your father and claimed to be acting on your behalf due to your, quote, severe emotional instability." I felt the blood drain from my face. Frank, he was not just reacting. He was on the offensive. He was trying to paint me as incompetent so he could step in as a conservator. It was a terrifyingly smart legal move. Did you give him the information? I asked, my voice tight. No, Sarah replied. The caller failed the secondary security protocol. He could not provide the unique access code that was mailed to the beneficiary's address of record 3 weeks ago. He became quite agitated and terminated the call. I leaned my head against the cool cinder block wall. The letter. The one Frank had hidden in his pocket the night he kicked me out. He had the access code. The only reason he had failed the security check was that he probably hadn't opened the letter yet, or he didn't realize the code was inside that specific envelope, but he had it. Miss Halston, I must be clear, Sarah continued, her tone shifting from informative to warning. The Hale Halston Trust is a complex structure. You are the sole beneficiary, but the activation requires your physical presence and valid government identification. If we cannot verify you, and if a challenge is filed regarding your competency, the assets could be frozen pending a court order. You need to be here on Thursday, with ID. I will be there, I said. And Sarah, if that man calls again, tell him nothing. We are bound by attorney-client privilege. Miss Halston, he is not our client. You are. I hung up. The name of the trust echoed in my mind. Hale Halston. Hale. That was the donor's name. Miles Hale. And Halston was my legal name. The trust had been set up specifically for me, bridging the gap between my biological father and the man who raised me. It was not a generic inheritance. It was a lifeline thrown across 18 years of silence, but I could not grab that lifeline without a piece of plastic with my face on it. I walked back onto the shop floor. Ro was welding a structural beam, sparks cascading around her like fireworks. She flipped her helmet up when she saw me approaching. You look like you just saw a ghost, Ro said. Worse, I said. Lawyers, I need my documents. Ro, I can't get the trust without them, and Frank won't give them back. Ro set down her welding torch. She wiped sweat from her forehead with a heavy leather glove. If you go back there alone, he will call the cops on you for trespassing. He is baiting you. I know, I said, but I have to try. Don't go alone, Ro said. She walked over to her desk and scribbled a name on a sticky note. There is a legal aid clinic downtown. Go see Mrs. Lasky. She handles domestic disputes. Ask her how to do this legally. Fight paper with paper. Beatrice, it is the only thing that sticks. I took the bus downtown during my lunch break. Mrs. Lasky was an overworked woman in a cardigan who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. But she listened to me. She told me exactly what to do. She explained the concept of a civil standby. You call the non-emergency line, she instructed, her pen tapping rhythmically on her desk. You request a police escort to retrieve personal property from your former residence. They stay for 15 minutes. They are there to keep the peace, not to settle disputes. But it gets you in the door. She also gave me a form to request a rush replacement of my birth certificate. Fill this out. Go to the county clerk. If Frank destroyed your copy, get a new one. It takes 3 days with the rush fee. I thanked her and ran to the county clerk's office 4 blocks away. I had $50 left from my first week's pay. It would cost me $40 to get the rush order. I stood in line for 45 minutes. When I finally reached the window, the clerk typed my information into the system. She frowned. Honey, we can't process this, she said. Why not? I asked, panic rising in my chest. I have the cash. There is already a request pending for this file, she said, turning the screen slightly so I could not see it. A certified copy was ordered 2 days ago. It was mailed out yesterday morning to the address on file. I stared at her. Frank. He had ordered a replacement copy the moment he kicked me out. He wasn't just hiding my documents. He was actively blocking me from getting new ones. He knew the system better than I did. Can I cancel that request? I asked. Can I order another one to a different address? Not while the first one is in transit, the clerk said. System flags it as a duplicate request to prevent fraud. You have to wait 10 business days. 10 days. I didn't have 10 days. The meeting with Harrington and Vale was on Thursday. I walked out of the government building into the gray afternoon light. I felt like a rat in a maze, hitting a dead end every time I turned a corner. Frank was systematically sealing the exits. I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency police number. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I requested a civil standby at the Halston residence for 6 o'clock that evening. I met the officer at the curb. Officer Miller was a large man with a bored expression and a coffee stain on his uniform shirt. He looked at his watch as I approached. "You Beatrice Halston?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "I just need to get my clothes and my legal documents." 15 minutes, Miller said. "Keep it civil. If there is shouting, we leave. If there is fighting, someone goes to jail. Understand?" "Yes, sir." We walked up the driveway. The house looked exactly the same as it had 4 nights ago, but it felt alien now, like a movie set I had wandered onto. I rang the doorbell. Frank opened the door. He was wearing his good father sweater, the beige one he wore to church. When he saw the police officer, his eyes widened in mock surprise. "Officer," Frank said, his voice trembling with performed concern. "Is everything okay? Is it Beatrice? Is she in trouble?" "She is here to collect her belongings, sir." Officer Miller said, "Civil standby." Frank looked at me, his face crumbling into a mask of disappointment. "Oh, Beatrice, you didn't have to bring the police. We are family. You could have just knocked." It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. "You told me you would call the cops if I came back," I said, stepping past him into the foyer. "I was upset," Frank said to the officer, ignoring me. "She ran away. Got involved with some bad people. We have been so worried." "I did not run away," I snapped. "You kicked me out." "Okay, let's just get the stuff." Officer Miller interrupted. "The clock is ticking." I ran to my room. It had been tossed. The mattress was stripped. The drawers were half open. I grabbed the rest of my clothes, shoving them into a trash bag I had brought. I grabbed my old backpack. Then I went to the master bedroom. Frank followed us, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. "Where are you going?" Frank asked. "To get my Social Security card," I said. "From the tin box." I walked to the dresser. The tin box was there. I opened it. It was empty. No birth certificates, no Social Security cards, no passports. Just the bare metal bottom of the box. I spun around. "Where are they?" "Frank, I don't know what you are talking about," Frank said calmly. "You took them. Remember the night you left? You took the whole folder. You gave me photocopies," I yelled. "You kept the originals." Officer Miller stepped forward. "Keep it down." "Officer, he stole my identity documents," I said, pointing at Frank. "He is holding them hostage." Frank shook his head, looking at the officer with a pained expression. "Officer, my daughter. She has been having episodes lately. Confused. Paranoia. We think it might be drugs. She took her documents. She probably lost them or sold them. And now she is blaming me." "I am not on drugs," I screamed. "He is lying. He is trying to steal a trust fund." Officer Miller held up a hand. "That is enough, Miss Halston. Do you have proof he has the documents?" "He hid them," I said. "Check his pockets. Check the safe." "I can't search the home without a warrant." "Miss," Miller said, "this is a civil matter. If you think he stole your property, you have to file a claim in small claims court." Small claims. I looked at him in disbelief. "I can't get a job. I can't prove who I am." "I am sorry," Miller said, "but your 15 minutes are up. We need to go." Frank smiled. It was a small, sad smile for the officer, but his eyes were hard as flint when they met mine. "Beatrice, honey, maybe you should come home. We can get you help. We can sign you into that program Pastor John talked about." He was building a narrative. He was establishing a record of me being unstable, paranoid, and in need of supervision. If this went to court, he would have a police officer testifying that I was screaming about conspiracies while he was calm and concerned. I grabbed my trash bag of clothes. I realized then that arguing would only dig the hole deeper. I had to be smarter. I had to be colder. "I don't need your help, Frank," I said, my voice dropping to a flat, controlled tone. And I don't need you to give me the documents. I just needed the officer to see that the box was empty. I looked at Officer Miller. Please note in your report that the family document box was empty when I arrived. Miller shrugged. I can note it. I walked out of the house, past Frank, past the lie of a happy home. I sat in the back of the police cruiser as Miller drove me to the bus stop. I had my clothes. I had my backpack, but I was still a ghost. That night, back at Kara's house, I lay on the floor of her bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I felt defeated. Frank was 2 steps ahead. He had blocked the replacement ID. He had hidden the originals. He had poisoned the police. My burner phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was an email notification. I had linked my new secure email to the phone. The subject line read, Urgent Asset Disclosure Meeting. Hale Halston Trust. I opened it. It was from Sarah at Harrington and Vale. Dear Miss Halston, per the terms of the trust instrument, a formal reading of the asset schedule and beneficiary designation is required within 7 days of the triggering event. We have scheduled this reading for Thursday at 10:00 a.m. Please be advised that we have received a formal petition from Mr. Frank Halston's legal representation claiming emergency guardianship. As such, Mr. Halston has demanded to be present at the reading. Under the laws regarding contested capacity, we are legally obligated to allow the petitioner to attend. He will be there. Bring whatever identification you possess. Failure to appear will be interpreted as a default on your claim. Sincerely, Sarah Jenkins. I dropped the phone on my chest. Frank was coming to the meeting. He wasn't just hiding. He was walking right into the lion's den with me. He was going to stand there in his beige sweater, look the lawyers in the eye, and tell them I was too crazy to handle my own money. He was going to try to take it all right in front of my face. I closed my eyes. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of the welding shop right before the arc struck. He wanted a fight, fine. He thought he was fighting a scared teenager who needed her daddy's permission to speak. He didn't realize he was fighting someone who had nothing left to lose. I sat up and grabbed my notebook. I turned to a fresh page. Thursday, 10:00 a.m. Objective destroy Frank's narrative. I didn't have my ID, but I had something else. I had the truth about the DNA. And if Frank wanted to play the concerned father card in front of a high-powered law firm, I was going to make sure everyone in that room knew exactly whose blood was running through my veins, and it wasn't his. The noise inside Blue Crest Fabrication was a physical weight, a constant, grinding roar of metal against metal that vibrated in the hollows of my chest. I welcomed it. The shrieking of the bandsaws and the rhythmic thud of the press brakes drowned out the thoughts that had been circling my brain like vultures since the police escort at my childhood home. I was sweeping aluminum shavings from under the CNC machine, my back aching in a way that felt honest and earned. It was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, 2 days before the hearing that would decide my fate. I did not hear them come in. I felt them. The atmosphere in the shop changed. The ambient chatter of the welders died down, replaced by a curious, watchful silence. I turned around, gripping the handle of my push broom like a weapon. Frank and Grayson were standing near the loading dock. They looked absurdly out of place in their clean, pressed khakis and button-down shirts, against the backdrop of grease-stained concrete and sparks. They looked like tourists in a war zone. Frank was holding a leather portfolio case, clutching it to his chest, as if he were afraid the airborne grit would contaminate it. My stomach dropped, but I did not step back. I stood my ground. Ro was 20 feet away, operating a forklift. She saw them, cut the engine, and folded her arms over the steering wheel, watching. Her presence was a silent promise that I was not alone. I walked toward them, stopping just outside of arm's reach. "You are trespassing," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the fear I had felt standing on their porch. Frank put on a smile that made my skin crawl. It was the smile he used when he was trying to return a defective appliance without a receipt paid. Patient and fake. "Beatrice," he said, pitching his voice to be heard over the hum of the ventilation fans. "We are not here to fight. We are here because we are worried about you. Look at this place. Look at you. You are covered in dirt. I am working, I said. Something neither of you seems to be doing right now. What do you want? Grayson stepped forward, sneering at my oversized work boots. Don't be a brat. Dad is trying to help you. You are making a mess of everything, dragging cops into family business. The family business ended when you threw my clothes on the lawn, I replied, keeping my eyes on Frank. State your business or I ask my boss to remove you. Frank sighed, a long theatrical exhale meant to show the world how burdened he was by his difficult daughter. He unzipped the leather portfolio and pulled out a document. It was thick, stapled at the corner, with colorful sticky flags marking signature lines. I spoke to Pastor John, Frank said, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. And I spoke to Dr. Evans. They both agree that you are going through a crisis, this shock. Finding out about your parentage, it has clearly unmoored you. You are not thinking straight. He held the document out to me. This is a temporary power of attorney. It just allows me to handle the legal matters with Harrington and Vale for you. You don't have to go to court. You don't have to deal with the stress. I will handle the trust. Make sure the money is invested properly for your future. And you can come home. We can forget all this ugliness. I looked at the paper. It was a trap, a bear trap painted gold. If I signed that, I was voluntarily declaring myself incompetent. I was handing him the keys to the vault. I am 18, I said. I am of sound mind, and I am not signing anything. Frank's face hardened. The mask slipped, revealing the desperate, angry man beneath. I raised you for 18 years. Beatrice, I put clothes on your back. I paid for your braces. I drove you to soccer practice. You owe me this. You think you can just walk away with a fortune because of some biological technicality. That money belongs to the family that raised you, not the stranger who donated a sample in a cup. You just said you aren't raising another man's kid, I countered, my voice rising. You said you have no obligation. Which is it? Frank, am I your daughter who owes you, or am I a stranger you kicked to the curb? You are an investment, he shouted, losing control. I poured money into you for 2 decades, and now that there is a return, you want to cut me out. I am entitled to that management fee. The shop was dead silent now. Every welder, every cutter, every machinist was listening. Frank realized he had shouted too loud. He looked around, flushing red. Grayson moved in then. Stepping into my personal space, he was taller than me, broader, and he used that size to intimidate. He lowered his voice so only I could hear a hiss of venom. Listen to me, you little leech, Grayson whispered. You sign the paper, or we bury you. You really think a judge is going to believe a girl who ran away to live in a factory? You are a bastard child. Beatrice, no one knows who your real daddy is. For all they know, Mom slept with a junkie. You have no standing. Without the Halston name, you are nothing. I felt a trembling start in my hands. But it wasn't fear. It was clear. I reached into the pocket of my work pants and pulled out my phone. The screen was glowing red. I hope you are right, I said, holding the phone up between us. I hope the judge needs convincing, because I just recorded every word you both said. Grayson recoiled as if I had pulled a knife. Frank stared at the phone, his mouth opening and closing. Get out, I said. Now. Rose started the forklift engine. It roared to life with a deafening cough. She revved it, the forks lifting menacingly. You heard the lady, Rose shouted over the engine. This is a hard hat zone. No spectators. Frank pointed a shaking finger at me. You will regret this. You are going to lose everything. I already lost the only thing that mattered, I said. I lost the illusion that you loved me. They retreated. I watched them walk back to the loading dock, their shoulders hunched, defeated for the moment but not broken. I stopped the recording and immediately uploaded it to 3 different cloud servers. I named the file Attempted Coercion. Blue Crest. That evening, I did not go back to Kara's house. I had found a room in a boarding house 3 blocks from the shop. It was a grim place, a narrow room with peeling wallpaper and a smell like boiled cabbage in the hallway. But it was mine. I paid by the week with cash. I sat on the sagging twin mattress, my laptop open on a milk crate I was using as a desk. I was trying to prepare for the hearing, organizing my thoughts, when my phone pinged. It was a notification from my email provider. New sign-in attempt detected. Location Hawthorne Falls. Device Windows Desktop. I froze. That was the family computer in the den. Frank or Grayson was trying to hack into my email. 2 minutes later, another ping, my bank app. 3 failed login attempts. Account temporarily locked. They were running down the list. They were trying to guess my passwords. Or maybe they had a keylogger installed on my old devices and were hoping I had not changed everything. It was a systematic, coordinated attack. They were looking for something specific. Maybe an email from the lawyers. Maybe the digital copy of the birth certificate I had ordered. I opened a new document on my laptop. I typed the heading in bold letters, harassment log. Date October 27th. Time 3:15 post-meridian. Location Bluecrest Fabrication. Incident. Frank and Grayson Halston approached me at work, attempted to coerce me into signing the power of attorney. Frank admitted to viewing me as an investment. Grayson threatened my legitimacy. Audio recording secured. Witness Ruth Mercer employer. Date October 27th. Time 8:30 post-meridian. Incident unauthorized access attempts on personal email and banking. IP address traces to Halston residence. I typed furiously, documenting every glance, every threat, every digital fingerprint. Roe had told me that in court. The person with the best notes wins. I was going to have the Encyclopedia Britannica of harassment. My phone buzzed again. A text message. I braced myself for another threat from Frank, but the name on the screen made my breath hitch. Mom. I opened the message. Dana. Be careful. He is desperate. The bank called today. We are 3 months behind on the mortgage. Grayson lost $40,000 on some crypto scheme he promised would pay off. Frank co-signed the loan. I stared at the screen. $40,000. Dana. He needs the trust management fee to stop the foreclosure. He thinks if he can get control, he can pay off the debt before the bank takes the house. That is why he kicked you out. He needed you gone so he could say you were missing or incompetent. It was never about the DNA. B. It was about the house. I let the phone slip from my hand onto the mattress. The realization washed over me like ice water. I had spent the last week agonizing over the rejection, wondering what was wrong with me, wondering why 18 years of love could evaporate in a second because of a biological mismatch. I had thought it was a tragedy of pride. A father's heart is broken by betrayal. It wasn't. It was accounting. Frank didn't hate me because I wasn't his. He hated me because I was the only thing standing between him and financial ruin. The eviction wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a tactical maneuver. He needed me out of the way so he could impersonate me, or control me, to access the funds to clean up Grayson's mess. Grayson wasn't the golden boy. He was the anchor dragging them all down, and I was the life raft they were trying to dismantle to build a fire. You aren't a father, I whispered to the empty room. You are just a thief. I picked up the phone and texted back. Thank you. Mom, stay safe. I turned off the lights and lay down, staring at the crack of light coming from the hallway under my door. I felt a strange sense of relief. The grief was gone. You grieve for a relationship that died, but this relationship hadn't died. It had never existed. I had been a long-term bond that finally matured, and Frank was just mad he couldn't cash the coupon. I was drifting into a restless sleep when a movement on my laptop screen caught my eye. I had set up a cheap webcam in the window facing the hallway, acting as a makeshift security system. The motion sensor had triggered. I sat up, my heart hammering. I clicked on the live feed. The hallway of the boarding house was dim, lit only by a flickering fluorescent bulb. The floor was covered in stained carpet. A figure was standing outside my door. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up low over his face. He wasn't knocking. He was just standing there, staring at the number on my door. He stood perfectly still for a full minute, his breathing visible as a slight rise and fall of his shoulders. Then he reached out. He didn't knock. He placed his hand flat against the wood of the door, right where the lock was. He pressed gently, testing the resistance. I held my breath, reaching for the heavy metal flashlight I kept by the bed. The figure pulled his hand back. He turned to leave. As he walked away down the narrow corridor, the camera caught the distinctive hitch in his step. It was a subtle limp, a favoring of the left leg. I knew that walk. It wasn't Frank. Frank walked with a heavy, stomping gait. It was Grayson, who had injured his knee playing football in high school and never let anyone forget it. My brother? No. The man who used to be my brother had found where I lived. He wasn't here to talk. He was casing the joint. He was checking the locks. I saved the video clip and added it to the folder. Date, October 28th. Time: 1:15 ante-meridian. Incident: Grayson Halston stalking my residence. Tested the lock. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat with my back against the door, the flashlight in my hand, waiting for the sun to come up. They were escalating. They knew the hearing was close, and they knew their legal options were shrinking. Violence was the only card they had left to play. But they had made a mistake. They thought fear would make me crumble. They didn't understand that fear, when compressed tightly enough, turns into diamond-hard resolve. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to walk into Harrington and Vale on Thursday morning, and I was going to bring the whole ugly truth with me. The smell hit me the moment I opened the door to room 4B. It was not the usual scent of boiled cabbage and old carpet that permeated the boarding house hallway. It was the smell of violation. It was the scent of disturbed dust, of someone else's sweat, of frantic movement in a space that was supposed to be still. I stood in the doorway, my hand still gripping the key, my other hand clutching my bag from the night shift. It was 4 a.m. My body was screaming for sleep, but my adrenaline spiked instantly, sharpening my vision. The room had been tossed. That was the only word for it. My mattress was flipped over. Leaning against the peeling wallpaper, the drawers of the cheap particle board dresser were pulled out and dumped onto the floor. My clothes, the few I had managed to salvage, were scattered like rags. My milk crate desk was overturned. My first instinct was to run, to back out into the hallway and scream, but I did not. I took a breath, held it, and stepped inside, closing the door behind me. I needed to know what they had taken. I stepped over a pile of socks and went to the hollow curtain rod above the window. I popped the plastic end cap off. My emergency cash, $300 I had saved from overtime pay, was still there, rolled tight. I looked at the floor. My laptop was sitting on the bed frame, closed but clearly moved. It was an old model, not worth much, but a thief would have taken it. Then I looked at the loose floorboard under the radiator. It had been pried up. The small, fireproof lockbox I kept there was gone. The lockbox did not contain money. It contained the photocopies of my birth certificate, the printouts of the bank transactions showing the theft, and most importantly, a USB drive. That drive contained the audio recording of Frank and Grayson trying to coerce me at the shop, along with scans of every document I had gathered so far. They had not come for value. They had come for evidence. I did not call the police immediately. Roe had taught me better than that. Secure your proof before you invite the chaos, she had said. I stepped over the mess and plugged my laptop into the wall. I opened the folder for the webcam software. My hands were steady. A cold, mechanical calm taking over my nervous system. I clicked on the event log. Motion detected, October 29th, 11:45 post-meridian. I clicked play. The grainy night vision footage showed the door jiggling. Then, a credit card or a shim slid through the crack. The lock clicked. The door opened. A figure stepped in. He was wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap, but he looked straight at the desk where the laptop sat. The light from the hallway hit his face for a fraction of a second. It was Grayson. I watched as my brother tore through my room. He was not being careful. He was frantic. He threw my clothes. He kicked the mattress. He was looking for something specific. When he found the loose floorboard, he visibly pumped his fist. He grabbed the lockbox, shoved it into a backpack that was already bulging, and ran out. The timestamp confirmed it. I was at Blue Crest Fabrication, 3 miles away, operating a drill press when my brother broke into my home. I saved the video. I uploaded it to the cloud. I emailed a copy to Mrs. Lasky at the Legal Aid Clinic. I emailed a copy to Sarah at Harrington and Vale. I saved a copy to my phone. Only then did I dial 911. When the police arrived, it was not Officer Miller this time. It was Detective Vance, a sharp-eyed woman who looked at the mess in my room and then at the video on my laptop with a grim expression. "Can you positively identify this individual?" she asked. "That is Grayson Halston," I said. "My brother. He lives at 42 Oak Street." "And what was in the box?" "Legal documents," I said, "and digital evidence of extortion that I intended to present in court on Thursday." Vance looked at me. "Extortion. He and my father are trying to force me to sign over a trust fund." I stated clearly. "They stole the evidence to stop me." Vance nodded. She didn't ask if I was on drugs. She didn't ask if I was confused. The video was absolute. "Stay here, Miss Halston. We are going to pay a visit to Oak Street. We have probable cause for a search based on the immediate pursuit of stolen property." I did not stay there. I followed them in a taxi, waiting down the block from the house I used to call home. I watched as 3 cruisers pulled up. I saw the lights go on inside. I saw Frank open the door in his bathrobe, shouting, waving his arms. Then I saw them bring Grayson out. He was not in handcuffs yet, but he looked small, pale, and terrified. A few minutes later, an officer walked out carrying a familiar gray lockbox and a black backpack. They had found it. He hadn't even opened it yet. He had probably just shoved it under his bed. Arrogant enough to think I wouldn't call the cops on my own family. I met Detective Vance at the precinct 2 hours later. She laid the items out on the table. The lockbox was still locked. The USB was there. "He claims you asked him to get it," Vance said, watching my reaction. "He says you called him, scared of the neighborhood, and asked him to secure your valuables." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened the call log and the text history. "I have not spoken to Grayson Halston since he threatened me at my workplace 2 days ago," I said, sliding the phone across the table. "Here are my location records from Google Maps. I was at work. Here is my call log. 0 incoming or outgoing calls to him. And here is my harassment log, detailing his previous stalking attempt." Vance scrolled through the phone. She looked at the harassment log I had started. She looked at the meticulous details. "He is lying," Vance said simply. She closed the notebook. "We are charging him with breaking and entering and theft. Depending on the value of the intellectual property on that drive, it could be a felony." "I want a restraining order," I said. "Emergency, temporary, whatever I can get right now, against Grayson, Frank, and Dana Halston." "We can issue a temporary order of protection based on the burglary charge," Vance agreed. "It will be served to them this morning." I walked out of the station as the sun was coming up. I felt lighter, but also colder. I had just put my brother in a holding cell. I waited for the guilt to hit me, but it didn't come. All I felt was the satisfaction of a math equation finally balancing out. By noon, the order was served. It was comprehensive. No contact within 500 feet. No electronic communication. No third-party contact. At 2 in the afternoon. My burner phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, recording immediately. "Hello? Beatrice?" It was a woman's voice, high-pitched, quivery. It was Aunt Linda, Frank's sister. "Who is this?" I asked, though I knew. "It is Aunt Linda. Honey, listen. I am at the house with Frank. He is just beside himself. Grayson is in jail. B. You have to drop the charges. This is family. Frank says if you just come over and talk, we can fix this. He is willing to forgive you for—" "Stop," I said. "Linda, is Frank in the room with you?" "Well, yes. He is right here. He is crying his eyes out. Frank asked you to call me. He just wants to make peace, honey." "You are violating a court order," I said. "The protection order forbids third-party contact. By asking you to call me, Frank Halston has just committed a criminal violation of that order. What? No. I am hanging up now. This call is recorded. Do not call again. I hung up. I saved the recording. I emailed it to Detective Vance and Mrs. Lasky. Subject violation of TRO, Frank Halston. Evidence attached. Frank thought the rules were suggestions. He thought he could charm or guilt his way around the law. He didn't understand that every time he moved, he was tightening the noose around his own neck. An hour later, I received an email from Sarah at Harrington and Vale. The tone was different this time. Less formal. More urgent. Miss Halston, we have received the police report regarding the burglary and the recovery of your documents. The fact that the opposing party attempted to physically steal evidence relevant to the trust administration is a severe escalation. Furthermore, our security team has flagged the attempt to access the trust accounts using the stolen data. This constitutes attempted fraud. We are immediately triggering a forensic audit of all accounts associated with your name, including historical custodial accounts, to determine if there has been a pattern of financial abuse prior to the trust activation. See you Thursday. A forensic audit. That was the nuclear option. They weren't just going to look at the trust. They were going to look at everything. Every check Frank had ever written from my accounts. Every transfer. Every hidden fee. I sat down on my bed. My mattress was right side up now. The sheets remade and opened the file of bank documents I had retrieved from the lockbox. I needed to be ready. I needed to understand the pattern before the lawyers did. I flipped through the pages of the teen savings account. I looked at the withdrawals again. The small ones. The $50 here. The $20 there. Lunch money for Grayson. Gas money for Frank. Then I turned to the back of the stack. There was a document I hadn't paid much attention to before because it was from when I was 17 and a half. It was a withdrawal slip for $1,000. The memo line said, "Car repair. Honda." I didn't have a Honda. Frank did. I looked at the signature line at the bottom of the slip. It was signed by Beatrice Halston. I stared at it. It looked like my signature. The loop of the B was right. The slant was right. To a bank teller who saw me once a month, it would pass. But I looked closer. I held it up to the light coming through the window. When I write the letter T, I cross it with a straight, sharp line, like a sword slash. It's a habit I picked up from a teacher in 5th grade. The T in Halston on this slip was not crossed with a slash. It was crossed with a loop, a small, lazy loop that connected back to the O. I scrambled through my backpack and pulled out an old birthday card Frank had written me years ago. Happy 10th birthday. Be love, Dad. I looked at the T on birthday. There it was. The loop. Frank hadn't just used his status as custodian to move money. That would have been gray but legal. But at 17 and a half, the bank required a co-signature from the minor for withdrawals over $500. Frank hadn't asked me to sign. He had forged my name. He had committed a felony. I felt a smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a wolf that just realized the trap it stepped in was actually a weapon it could use. "You got greedy, Frank," I whispered. I took a high-resolution photo of the withdrawal slip next to the birthday card. I circled the 2 T's in red digital ink. I added it to the USB drive. The hearing was tomorrow. Frank was going to walk in there claiming I was incompetent. He was going to claim he needed to protect me. But I wasn't going to need a defense. I was walking in there with a loaded gun, and Frank had provided the bullets. I packed my bag for the morning. I put on my one nice outfit, a blazer I had bought at a thrift store, and steamed in the shower. I put in the USB drive. I put it in the notebook. I lay down to sleep. And for the first time in a week, I slept without dreaming. I didn't need to dream. My reality was finally about to become a nightmare for the people who deserved it. The weeks that followed the burglary were a blur of blue sparks and black coffee. I stopped looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds and started looking forward. Frank and Grayson were tangled up in restraining orders and criminal charges, which gave me breathing room. I did not waste a single second of it. I enrolled in the night certification program at the local technical college. My life became a grueling, rhythmic cycle that would have broken the girl I was 2 weeks ago. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I worked at Blue Crest Fabrication from 6 until 2 in the afternoon. I took a nap in the break room for 20 minutes, ate a sandwich that tasted like sawdust, and then went to class from 4 until 9 at night. My world narrowed down to the puddle of molten metal at the tip of my welding torch. I learned to breathe through the fumes. I learned to keep my hands steady, even when my muscles were screaming with lactic acid. Ro Mercer became less of a boss and more of a general. She did not coddle me. One afternoon, she threw a stack of invoices onto my workbench. "Read them." She commanded, "Tell me where I'm getting screwed." I stared at the papers. I had never seen a commercial invoice in my life. I spent 2 hours cross-referencing the cost of steel tubing against the supplier's quote. I found a surcharge for delivery that was double the industry standard. I pointed it out to Ro. She nodded, a rare grin cracking her stony face. "Good eyes. Now, call them. Tell them we are switching suppliers if they do not refund the difference." I hesitated. "Me you want to survive in this world?" Beatrice Rowe asked, leaning in close. "You have to know the value of things, and you have to be willing to walk away if the price is wrong. That applies to steel, and it applies to people." I made the call. My voice shook for the first 10 seconds, but by the end of the conversation, I had secured a $300 credit. It was a small victory, but it felt like I had just conquered a kingdom. Ro taught me about contracts. She showed me the trapdoors hidden in liability clauses. She taught me how to document change orders so a client could not claim they never asked for the extra work. She was arming me. Frank had taught me that money was a weapon used to control people. Ro taught me that money was a tool used to build freedom. 3 weeks later, I took my certification exam. I had to perform an overhead V-groove weld, one of the hardest positions because gravity is constantly trying to pull the molten metal down onto your face. I lowered my hood. I struck the arc. I didn't think about Frank. I didn't think about the trust fund. I just watched the puddle. When the inspector bent my test piece in the hydraulic press to check for cracks, it held. It didn't break. I was a certified structural welder. That piece of paper was worth more to me than the Halston name ever was. With my certification in hand, I applied to Northspan Structural, a massive construction firm handling bridge repairs and high-rise skeletons. I got the job. The starting pay was $28 an hour. With the overtime mandated by the union contract, I was making more in a week than I used to make in 2 months of babysitting. The first time that paycheck hit my new bank account, an account Frank Halston did not even know existed, I stared at the number on my phone screen until my eyes watered. It was $1,412. After taxes, I did not go shopping. I did not buy a new phone. I sat down at my laptop and opened a brokerage account. I set up an automatic transfer. 50% of every paycheck went into a low-cost index fund. 20% went into a high-yield emergency savings account. The rest covered my rent and food. I lived like a monk. I ate ramen and apples. I wore my work clothes until they fell apart. I was building a fortress. I vowed to myself that no one would ever be able to starve me out of a room again. If Frank wanted to play financial games, he was going to find out that I was playing a different sport entirely. I didn't stop at the day job. On weekends, I started taking small freelance gigs. I posted an ad on the community board at the hardware store, welding and metal repair, fast, reliable, cash or card. I fixed a broken harrow for a farmer named Mr. Henderson. I repaired a wrought iron railing for a wealthy widow on the hill. I welded a cracked trailer hitch for a landscaper. I was working 7 days a week. My hands were permanently stained with grease. I had burns on my forearms that looked like constellations. It was one of those burns that led me to Evan. I was working late on a Saturday at a job site for Northspan, welding a support bracket on a retrofit project. I was rushing. I got careless. A piece of slag hot. Molten byproduct slipped past my leather glove and lodged itself against the inside of my wrist. I hissed in pain, dropping the torch. The skin blistered immediately, angry and red. The site safety officer called the paramedics just to be safe, citing protocol. I was sitting on the tailgate of a truck, pouring water over my arm, feeling like an idiot. When the ambulance pulled up, a guy hopped out. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with calm eyes and a movement style that was efficient, not hurried. He didn't saunter. He arrived. "I am fine," I said, wincing as the air hit the burn. "It is just a second degree. I have had worse." "I bet you have," the paramedic said. He looked at the welding rig, then at me. "But let's not let it get infected. Infection takes you off the job for a week. Can you afford a week off?" He knew exactly what to say. He didn't baby me. He appealed to the work. "No," I said. "I can't." He cleaned the wound with practiced hands. He introduced himself as Evan Miles. He didn't flirt. He didn't ask for my number. He asked about the weld. "Overhead," he asked, wrapping the gauze. "Vertical up," I corrected. "Harder to control the heat." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. "My dad was a pipe fitter. I know the smell of a 60-10 rod burning. You are good at what you do." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because you are still here." Evan said, "Most people quit after the first burn." He finished the bandage. "Keep it dry, change it twice a day, and maybe tighten your glove strap." He handed me a slip of paper with care instructions. On the back, in handwriting that was barely legible, was a number. "If it gets red or hot, call the dispatch," he said. Then he paused. "If you want to get coffee without the smell of burning flux, call the number on the back." I looked at him. I was covered in soot. My hair was matted with sweat. I was wearing men's coveralls that were 2 sizes too big. "I don't need saving, Evan," I said, testing him. "I am a paramedic," he said, climbing back into the ambulance. "I save people who are dying. You look like you are living harder than anyone I have met all week." I put the number in my pocket. I didn't call him that day, but I didn't throw it away, either. The next week, I took a step that Roe had suggested. I went to the state website and filed paperwork. I paid the filing fee with my own debit card. I officially registered Ironclad Fabrications, LLC. I opened a business bank account. I got a tax ID number. I started running my weekend jobs through the company. I issued professional invoices. I paid taxes on every single dime. I wanted a paper trail so bright it could be seen from space. If Frank or his lawyers ever tried to claim I was making illicit income, or that I was financially unstable, I would drown them in spreadsheets. I was 18 years old, and I was a business owner with perfect books. On Tuesday, 2 days before the big meeting at Harrington and Vale, the mail arrived at the boarding house. There was a thick envelope from the county clerk. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a certified, raised seal copy of my birth certificate, the real one, the one that proved I was born, the one that proved I was Beatrice Halston. I held it up to the light. It was beautiful. Beside it was a letter from the Social Security Administration. My replacement card. I had done it. I had rebuilt my identity from scrap, piece by piece. I had my ID. I had my money. I had my evidence. I felt a surge of triumph that made me want to scream. I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. I had outworked them. I had outsmarted them. I sat down on my bed and pulled out the invitation to the trust reading. Thursday, 10 in the morning, I was ready. Then, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Sarah at the law firm. The subject line was Update, Opposing Counsel Request. I frowned and clicked it open. Dear Miss Halston, in preparation for Thursday's disclosure, we are legally required to inform you that the petitioner, Mr. Frank Halston, through his attorney, has filed a motion for discovery of assets. He is demanding to see the full schedule of the trust's holdings before the meeting, claiming that as your guardian de facto, he needs to assess tax liabilities. We have denied this request based on your previous instructions and the lack of a court order. However, be advised he is aggressive. He knows there is something significant in this trust, and he is trying to peek at the cards before the game starts. See you Thursday. Bring your ID. I lowered the phone. A cold smile touched my lips. Frank was panicking. He was flailing. He knew he was losing his grip on me, so he was trying to grab the money directly. He wanted to see the number. He wanted to know how much I was worth so he could calculate exactly how much he needed to steal to save his own skin. He wanted to see the assets. "Oh, you will see them, Frank," I said to the empty room. "You will see every single penny, and it is going to be the last thing you ever see before you hit the floor." I grabbed my welding helmet from the corner and polished the lens. I had a shift at Northspan in an hour. I had beams to connect. I had a city to build. Frank Halston was the past. I was building the future. And on Thursday, I was going to use the present to crush him. The legal summons arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a process server who looked like he regretted his career choices. He caught me just as I was unlocking the gate to the ironclad fabrications storage unit I had rented for my side business. He handed me a thick stack of papers, muttered an apology, and walked away. I sat on a bucket of joint compound and read the cover page. Plaintiff, Frank Halston. Defendant, Beatrice Halston. Nature of suit, civil fraud. Embezzlement of familial assets. And petition for emergency conservatorship. I had to give it to Frank. He had an imagination. According to the 30 pages of legal fiction in my hands, I had not been kicked out. I had absconded with family funds. I was mentally compromised by a sudden rebellion, and most dangerously, he claimed that the funds in the Hale Halston Trust were commingled family assets, derived from his support of me over 18 years, giving him a rightful claim to manage them. He was suing me for the money he had not even seen yet. I did not scream. I did not cry. I tossed the papers onto the passenger seat of my truck and drove to Northspan. I had a job to do, but Frank was done fighting on paper. He wanted a spectacle. 2 hours later, I was 40 stories up on the skeleton of the new Meridian Tower, welding a moment connection on a perimeter column. The wind was whipping around the steel, cold and biting. My radio crackled. "Halston," the foreman's voice barked. "Get down here, now!" I secured my gear and took the construction elevator down, my stomach tightening. When the cage hit the ground floor, I heard the shouting before I saw the source. Frank was standing at the edge of the site, right at the security gate. He was wearing a suit that looked too tight. His face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He was screaming at the site manager, a burly man named Dave who had zero patience for civilians. "She is a liar." Frank was yelling, pointing a shaking finger at the high steel. "She is working here illegally. She is mentally unstable. I am her father, and I demand you release her into my custody." Dave looked ready to snap a crowbar in half. He saw me walking up, removing my hard hat. "Beatrice," Dave said, his voice low and dangerous, "you want to tell me why this lunatic is claiming you stole his retirement fund and ran away to join a circus." I stopped 10 feet back, well within the safety zone, but close enough to look Frank in the eye. "He is not my father," I said, my voice steady. "And he is violating a court order." Frank saw me and lunged against the chain-link fence. "Beatrice, you ungrateful little wretch. Tell them how you tricked me. You come home right now and sign those papers." "Sir?" The security guard stepped in, hand on his belt. "You need to step back." "I have rights," Frank screamed. "That girl is my property. She is a minor." "I am 18, I said loud enough for the gathering crowd of ironworkers to hear. "And I have a temporary restraining order against you. Frank, you are required to stay 500 feet away from my person and my place of employment. You are currently about 10 feet away," Frank sneered, his desperation making him reckless. "That order is a piece of paper I am trying to save you from yourself." He tried to push past the guard. He actually put his hands on a uniformed security officer and shoved. That was the mistake. The guard didn't even flinch. He grabbed Frank's arm, spun him around, and pinned him against the hood of a parked truck. "Police now," the guard yelled to his partner. I watched as Frank struggled, spitting insults, calling me a thief, a liar, a whore. My coworkers, men and women who measured respect by how straight your beads were, looked from him to me. They didn't see a scared little girl. They saw a certified welder standing calm while a man in a cheap suit lost his mind. When the police arrived, they didn't just cite him, they cuffed him. Violation of a protective order is a mandatory arrest in this county. As they shoved Frank into the back of the cruiser, He locked eyes with me. "You will pay for this," he mouthed. "I will burn it all down." "You already did," I whispered. I went back up the elevator. I finished my shift. I welded 5 more joints, and every single one passed inspection. But the assault wasn't just physical, it was social. That night, my phone started blowing up with notifications. I had deleted most social media, but Kara sent me screenshots. Grayson was busy. He had posted a long sob story status update on Facebook, tagging every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the tri-state area. "Please pray for my family. My sister Beatrice has completely lost her way. She has been seduced by the lifestyle of easy money. We found out she is being sponsored by an older man she met online. She ran away to live with him. My dad is heartbroken trying to get her back. She had him arrested today just for trying to talk to her. We are worried she is on drugs. Please don't believe her lies." The comments were a cesspool. Relatives I hadn't seen in years were chiming in. I always knew she was trouble. Poor Frank, after all he did for her, praying for you. Grayson was smart. He knew he couldn't win on the facts, so he was trying to destroy my character. He wanted to make sure that when we walked into court, the judge would see a sugar baby on drugs, not a victim of financial abuse. I felt a flash of heat, the urge to reply, to post the photos of my welding certification, to post the video of Grayson robbing my room. "No," Rose said when I showed her the post the next morning at the shop. "Don't wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it." "He is ruining my name," I said, gripping the phone. "Your name is what you build," Rose said, tapping the steel table. "Not some failed dropshipper types on the internet. You fight this in court. The judge doesn't care about Facebook likes. The judge cares about evidence." She was right. I put the phone away. I did not reply. Instead, I went to the library and printed out everything: the lawsuit, the police report from the construction site, the screenshots of Grayson's libelous posts. I organized them into a binder. I called it The Pattern of Escalation. I took the binder to the legal aid clinic. Mrs. Lasky whistled low when she saw the police report from the site. "He violated the order in front of witnesses and assaulted a security guard," she asked. "Yes." "And he filed this frivolous civil suit claiming conservatorship." "Yes." "Beatrice," Mrs. Lasky said, taking off her glasses. "He just handed us the case. He is proving he is unstable. He is proving he is a threat. We are going to file a motion to dismiss his suit and a motion to consolidate everything into the trust hearing on Thursday. We are going to ask the judge to settle the issue of the executor once and for all. Can we do that?" "Watch me," she said. That afternoon, I received a secure message from Sarah at Harrington and Vale. "Miss Halston, we have been notified of Mr. Halston's arrest and the civil suit he filed. Our firm takes a very dim view of individuals who attempt to intimidate our beneficiaries. Please be advised that the Hale Halston Trust contains a specific clause known as an in terrorem or no contest provision. While usually applied to beneficiaries, there is language in the founding document that states any party attempting to coerce, defraud, or unduly influence the primary beneficiary shall be permanently barred from acting in any fiduciary capacity regarding this trust. Frank Halston has essentially disqualified himself. We just need to prove it to the judge. The hearing is set. Thursday at 9. The judge has ordered Frank to appear in person to explain his petition. Bring your evidence. I was cleaning my welding hood that night, getting ready for bed, when my burner phone rang. It was Dana. I hesitated. The court order banned third-party contact. But Dana was not a third party. She was my mother, and she sounded like she was hiding in a closet. "Beatrice," she whispered, "don't hang up, please. You shouldn't be calling. Mom, Frank will get in more trouble." "He is not here," she said. Her voice was thin, terrified. "He is at the lawyer's office. Beatrice, you have to know why he is doing this. It is the house. I know about the debt." "Mom, no, you don't understand," she sobbed. "The foreclosure notice came today. The bank is giving us 30 days. But it is not just the mortgage. Frank, He borrowed money from people he shouldn't have. Loan sharks, Beatrice. To cover Grayson's gambling debts. I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just a bank. It was criminals. He thinks the trust has millions, Dana whispered. He thinks if he can get control for just 1 month, he can pay them off and put the money back before anyone notices. He is terrified. He says they are going to break his legs. That is why he came to the job site. He is not crazy. He is being hunted. He is hunting me. Mom, I said coldly. He is trying to feed me to the wolves to save himself. I know, she wept. I know. I wanted you to know he is desperate. Be careful at court. He has nothing left to lose. Neither do I said. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. I felt a strange pang of pity, but it was distant, like watching a car crash on the news. Frank had dug a hole, filled it with spikes, and jumped in. Now he wanted to pull me in to cushion his fall. I wasn't going to let him. The morning of the hearing arrived with a gray steel sky. I put on my thrift store blazer. I put on my clean work boots because I didn't own heels, and I didn't want to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I was a welder. I was a daughter of no one, and I was ready. I walked toward the courthouse. The steps were crowded with people. Lawyers in expensive suits, defendants looking nervous. I saw Frank and Grayson near the entrance. Frank looked haggard. His suit was rumpled, likely from spending a few hours in a holding cell before making bail. Grayson looked sulky, typing furiously on his phone, probably posting another lie about me. They saw me. Frank started to move toward me, his eyes wide and manic. But his lawyer, a sweaty man with a briefcase that looked like it was made of vinyl, grabbed his arm and held him back. The restraining order was in effect. 1 step closer, and he would go back to jail. I walked past them. I didn't look down. I didn't look away. I looked straight ahead at the metal detectors. I was through security and walking toward courtroom 304 when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, thinking it was Roe wishing me luck or Mrs. Lasky telling me she was inside. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. Area code 212. New York City. I opened the message. If you want to know who your real father is, come to the hearing. Do not let Frank settle. I will be in the back row. I stopped in the middle of the hallway. People brushed past me, grumbling. But I stood frozen. My real father, the donor, Miles Hale. I had assumed he was dead, or that he was just a name on a piece of paper, a rich man who had deposited a sample and some cash 20 years ago and forgotten about it. The lawyers had never mentioned he was alive. They only talked about trust. I looked at the phone again. I will be in the back row. I looked up at the double doors of the courtroom. My heart hammered against my ribs, harder than it ever had when I was hanging off the side of a skyscraper. I wasn't just walking into a legal battle anymore. I was walking into a revelation. I put the phone in my pocket. I took a deep breath of the sterile courthouse air. I adjusted the lapel of my blazer. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The conference room at Harrington and Vale was soundproof, a glass-walled aquarium of silence high above the city streets. I sat at the mahogany table, my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles were white. On one side of me sat Sarah Jenkins, my attorney. On the other sat Mrs. Lasky from Legal Aid, who had insisted on seeing this through. Across from us sat a man I had never met. He was the one who had sent the text message. He introduced himself as Arthur Sterling. He was not a relative. He was a fiduciary, a man whose job was to protect assets, not people. He wore a suit that cost more than Frank Halston made in 3 months, and he had the air of someone who knew the end of the movie before the opening credits had finished rolling. "We have the results," Sarah said, placing a thin file on the table. 2 days ago, Sarah had insisted on a rush DNA test. She said we needed to close the loop. Frank's entire argument, both for kicking me out and for claiming guardianship, hinged on his erratic narrative about paternity. We needed science to nail his feet to the floor. "Let's make it official," I said. "Am I his daughter?" Sarah opened the file. "Biologically, no. The test confirms a 0% match between you and Frank Halston. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, even though I knew it. Hearing it from a lab report felt like a shackle snapping open. However, Sarah continued, her voice sharp, that does not help Frank. In fact, it hangs him. I pulled your original birth records from the county archives. Frank Halston is listed as the father. He signed the affidavit of paternity 18 years ago. Under the law, he is your father. He accepted the rights and the responsibilities. He cannot use biology as a trapdoor to escape the obligation of support while simultaneously using the legal definition of parent to climb back in through the window for a payout. He is trying to have it both ways, Mrs. Lasky muttered, scribbling on her notepad. He wants to be a stranger when you need a home, but a father when there is a check to be cashed. Exactly, Sarah said. But there is a second part to this test. She slid the paper toward me. We ran your sample against the reference sample held in the Trust's secure vault, Sarah said. It is a match, 99.9%. I looked at the name on the paper, Miles Hale. I looked up at Arthur Sterling. Who is he? Is he alive? Miles Hale is very much alive, Sterling said. His voice was dry, precise. He is not a billionaire playboy, Miss Halston. He is a professor of mathematics at MIT. He is a quiet man, a private man. Then why? I asked. Why the trust? Why now? Sterling folded his hands. 20 years ago, Miles was a graduate student. He needed money. He donated to a fertility clinic. It was an anonymous donation. He signed away his rights. He never intended to know the children. But he found out, I said. 3 years ago, a data breach at the clinic exposed some donor records, Sterling explained. Miles was notified. He hired my firm to quietly investigate the outcomes of his donations. He found you. He found out that you were living in a household that was financially precarious. He spied on me. He audited you, Sterling corrected. He saw Frank Halston's credit score. He saw the liens on the house. He saw the gambling debts of your brother. Miles could not intervene directly without disrupting your life, so he set up a dormant trust, a safety net. It was designed to trigger on your 18th birthday, to ensure that you and only you would have the resources to start your life, free from the Halston debt spiral. I felt a lump form in my throat. A stranger, a math professor in Massachusetts I had never met, had cared more about my future than the man who sat at the dinner table with me for 18 years. So the letter, I said, the one Frank hid. It was the notification, Sterling said. Frank intercepted it. He read it. He realized that on your 18th birthday, you would become independently wealthy, and he realized that if you knew, you would leave. The door to the conference room opened. A secretary stepped in. Mrs. Halston is here. My mother walked in. She looked small, shrunken inside a raincoat that was too big for her. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked straight at me. Her eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. Dana, Mrs. Lasky said gently, you understand that you are here voluntarily. You are not under subpoena yet. I know, Dana whispered. She sat down in the empty chair next to me. She smelled like rain and fear. Tell her, Mom, I said. Tell them the truth. Dana took a shaky breath. She looked at Sterling, then at Sarah. Frank knew, she said. Her voice was barely audible. He always knew. We couldn't have more children. Frank, he had complications from an illness right after Grayson was born. It left him sterile. He was so ashamed. He made me promise never to tell a soul. Not his mother, not his friends, especially not Grayson. She twisted a tissue in her hands. We went to the clinic together. He picked the donor profile. He signed the papers. He drove me to the appointments. You weren't a mistake. Beatrice, you were planned. Frank wanted a daughter. Then why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why scream at me that I am not his? Why throw the kid on the table? Because he is drowning, Dana said, tears spilling over. The loan sharks gave him a deadline, October 31st, Halloween. If he didn't come up with $50,000, they said they would hurt Grayson. They said they would take the house. She looked at me, pleading. When that letter came from the law firm, Frank saw it as a miracle. He thought he could bully you into signing over the management rights, but he knew you were smart. He knew if you read the letter, you would hire a lawyer. So he had to break you first. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. It was a strategy. The cake, the balloons, the public humiliation, the suitcase on the lawn. It wasn't rage. It was a calculated psychological demolition. He wanted me homeless, scared, and desperate, so that when he showed up with a solution and a pen, I would sign anything just to be allowed back inside. He didn't hate me. He just needed to liquidate me. He bet on my fear, I said softly. He bet that I was a scared little girl who couldn't survive a night in the cold. He was wrong, Dana sobbed. I told him he was wrong. I told him you were stronger than him. Sarah Jenkins cleared her throat. She pushed a button on the intercom. Bring in the forensic accountant. A woman in a sharp gray blazer entered. She was holding a tablet. We have completed the preliminary trace, Sarah said. We know about the forgery on the withdrawal slip, but it goes deeper. Frank has been using your social security number to apply for microloans for 3 years. He has been cycling debt in your name. That is why he fought so hard to stop you from getting your ID. If you saw a credit report, his house of cards would collapse. Sarah looked at me. Beatrice, tomorrow is the hearing. Frank has filed a motion to be present. He thinks he is coming to argue for guardianship, but we are going to flip the script. We are going to present the trust documents, the DNA evidence, and the forensic audit. And the money, I asked. Does he know how much is in the trust? No, Sterling said. He is guessing. He thinks it is maybe $50,000 or $100,000, enough to pay his debts. Tomorrow, Sarah said, a cold, predatory smile touching her lips. We are going to read the schedule of assets into the public record. Frank is going to sit there and listen to the exact number he tried to steal, and then he is going to watch you walk away with it. I looked at Dana. You should divorce him, Mom, before he drags you down with him. Dana lowered her head. I can't. He is all I have. No, I said, standing up. He is all you chose. There is a difference. I walked out of the office. The air outside was crisp, smelling of exhaust and autumn leaves. I checked my phone. I had a text from Evan. Coffee. Or are you too busy taking down the patriarchy? I typed back. Meet me at the shop. I went to Blue Crest. I didn't work. I just sat in the break room, watching the sparks fly on the floor. Ro came in and sat down next to me. She didn't say anything. She just handed me a sandwich. Are you ready for tomorrow? She asked. I think so, I said. I found out who my real father is. Ro raised an eyebrow. And he is a math teacher who wanted to help, I said. He is a good man, but he is not my dad. He is just the source. Blood is just biology, Ro said, taking a bite of her apple. Family is who shows up when you are bleeding. Evan walked in 10 minutes later. He was still in his uniform, looking tired but alert. He sat on the bench opposite me. You look like you just went 12 rounds, Evan said. I went 18 years, I said. Tomorrow is just the bell ringing. I looked at them. Ro, with her scarred hands and welder's mask, Evan, with his medical bag and quiet patience, and somewhere in the city, Mrs. Lasky and Sarah were sharpening their knives. I realized then that Frank Halston had made a fatal error. He thought that by stripping me of my family, he would leave me alone, but by stripping me of my family, he had cleared the space for me to find a better one. Frank thinks he is going to court to save his house, I said to them. He doesn't realize he's going to court to watch his life end. Do you want us there? Evan asked. In the gallery. Yes, I said. I don't need you to say anything. I don't need them to believe me. I just need the court to see the truth. And I want witnesses when the truth hits Frank like a freight train. I went back to the boarding house that night, but I didn't sleep. I laid out my clothes for court. the blazer, the clean jeans, the boots. I opened my laptop and looked at the spreadsheet of the trust that Arthur Sterling had emailed me. I scrolled down to the bottom line. The number was there. Stark, undeniable. Frank had destroyed a family for $50,000. He had no idea what he had thrown away. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. "See you in court, Dad," I whispered. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a dry, dusty scent that stuck to the back of my throat. I sat at the defendant's table, my back straight, my hands resting on the binder of evidence I had compiled. To my right sat Sarah Jenkins, radiating the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you are holding a royal flush. To my left sat Mrs. Lasky, looking fierce in her cardigan. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Frank Halston walked in. He was trying so hard. He wore his best suit, a navy blue number that had seen better days, and he had combed his thinning hair over his bald spot with meticulous care. He walked with a limp that I knew he did not have yesterday, leaning on a cane he must have bought at a pharmacy on the way here. He was playing the role of the frail, heartbroken father to the hilt. He cast a sorrowful look toward the judge, then a look of pained disappointment at me. But as he passed my table, his eyes didn't stay on my face. They darted down to the stack of files in front of Arthur Sterling, the trust administrator. Frank's gaze was hungry. It was the look of a starving dog smelling a steak through a locked door. Grayson shuffled in behind him, looking less like a grieving brother and more like a cornered rat. He slumped into the chair beside Frank, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Judge Vance, no relation to the detective, swept in. She was a woman with sharp glasses and a face that suggested she had heard every lie ever invented and was impressed by none of them. "We are here on the matter of the petition for emergency conservatorship filed by Frank Halston against Beatrice Halston," the judge said, looking over her spectacles, "and a counter-motion for dismissal and asset protection filed by the respondent. Mr. Halston, you may proceed." Frank stood up, leaning heavily on his prop cane. His lawyer, a man who looked like he was sweating grease, stood with him. "Your Honor," Frank began, his voice trembling with practiced emotion, "I am here with a heavy heart. My daughter, Beatrice, has been influenced by bad actors. She ran away from a loving home. She is 18. Yes, but she is emotionally fragile. She has been erratic, violent, even. I am only asking for temporary control over her financial affairs to protect her from herself. I believe there is a small trust fund involved, and I fear she will squander it on drugs or the people who are manipulating her." He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. "I have supported her for 18 years. I only want to ensure her future is secure." The judge looked at him impassively. "Thank you. Mr. Halston. Ms. Jenkins." Sarah stood up. She did not use a cane. She did not use theatrics. She simply picked up a single piece of paper. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice clear and cutting, "the petitioner claims his daughter is erratic and incapable of self-support. We would like to enter into evidence Exhibit A Beatrice Halston's current employment contract with Northspan Structural, dated 2 weeks ago. Beatrice is a certified structural welder, earning a union wage. She is not destitute. She is not on drugs. She is a taxpayer." Frank blinked. He opened his mouth to object, but Sarah wasn't finished. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "the petitioner claims he wishes to protect the assets. However, we have evidence that suggests his definition of protection looks a lot like embezzlement. We are asking the court to unseal the full audit of the Hale Halston Trust and the associated custodial accounts." Frank's lawyer jumped up. "Objection relevance. The trust details are private." "The trust is the subject of your petition," the judge snapped. "Overruled. Proceed. Ms. Jenkins." Sarah nodded to Arthur Sterling. Arthur stood up. He adjusted his silk tie and opened the leather portfolio in front of him. The room went silent. Frank leaned forward, his knuckles white on the handle of his cane. This was it. This was the moment he had destroyed my life for. He was finally going to see the prize. The Hale-Halston Trust was established 18 years ago by Mr. Miles Hale, Arthur stated. It was designed to accumulate value through a diversified portfolio of high-yield index funds, municipal bonds, and a locked life insurance annuity. Arthur paused. He looked directly at Frank. Before we discuss the current value, I must address the petitioner's claim of commingled assets. A forensic audit of the custodial accounts managed by Frank Halston shows a pattern of systematic withdrawal, not contribution. We have documented 54 separate transactions where funds belonging to the minor were used to pay for the petitioner's mortgage, vehicle repairs, and gambling debts incurred by his son, Grayson Halston. Grayson sank lower in his chair. Frank's face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. "That is a lie," Frank sputtered. "I was reimbursing myself for expenses." "With a forged signature," Sarah interjected. She flashed the image of the withdrawal slip on the courtroom monitor. The 2 different T crossings were circled in bright red. "This withdrawal for $1,000 was made when Beatrice was at school. The signature is a forgery. We have a handwriting expert's affidavit to confirm it." The judge's eyes narrowed. She looked at Frank with a new, dangerous intensity. "Sit down, Mr. Halston, and be quiet." Arthur Sterling cleared his throat. "Regarding the value of trust, Mr. Halston seems to be under the impression that this is a minor fund. A few $1,000s, perhaps." Frank was staring at Arthur. His breathing was shallow. He needed that money. He needed it to be $50,000, maybe 60. If it was less, he was dead. If it was more, he was saved. "The trust has been aggressively managed for 18 years with 0 withdrawals," Arthur said. "The portfolio includes early investments in several major tech sector IPOs." He picked up the summary sheet. "The total value of the Hale-Halston Trust, of which Beatrice Halston is the sole beneficiary with full autonomous control effective immediately, is—" Arthur paused for a beat. The silence was absolute. $2,462,314.42. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. $2,462,000. I saw the exact moment the information hit Frank's brain. His eyes widened until I thought they would pop out of his skull. His mouth fell open, creating a dark, silent O of shock. He had kicked me out for $50,000. He had destroyed his family, humiliated his wife, and committed felonies for a fraction of what was sitting in that account. And then, the second realization hit him. That money was mine, all of it, and because he had played his hand so viciously, he had ensured he would never see a single penny of it. $2 million, Frank wheezed. He tried to stand up, maybe to protest, maybe to grab the paper, but his legs refused to cooperate. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like a curtain falling. His eyes rolled back in his head. Frank Halston collapsed. He didn't crumple gracefully like they do in movies. He went down like a sack of wet cement. He hit the floor with a heavy, sickening thud, knocking his cane against the prosecution table. "Dad," Grayson yelled, jumping up, but he looked more terrified than concerned. "Order," the judge shouted. "Bailiff, call the medics." The courtroom erupted into controlled chaos. The bailiffs moved in, checking Frank's pulse. He was breathing, but he was out cold. His brain had simply refused to process the magnitude of his loss. I didn't move. I sat perfectly still, watching the man who had terrified me for 18 years lying on the dirty linoleum. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Sarah. "He is fine," Sarah whispered. "It is a vasovagal response. He fainted from the shock." The judge banged her gavel, cutting through the noise. "We are still in session. The medics will attend to Mr. Halston. In the meantime, I have heard enough." She looked down at Grayson, who was standing over his father, looking for an exit. "The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice," the judge ruled, her voice sharp as a blade. "Furthermore, based on the evidence of forgery and the forensic audit presented by the trust, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for a criminal investigation into fraud and identity theft." Grayson looked up, panic written all over his face. Your Honor, I didn't know— Mr. Grayson Halston, the judge interrupted. I also have a police report here regarding a burglary at the respondent's residence. There is video evidence of you entering the premises and removing property. You are to remain in this courtroom until the officers can execute the outstanding warrant for your arrest. Grayson slumped back into his chair, putting his head in his hands. It was over. The house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had incinerated. The medics loaded Frank onto a stretcher. He was groaning now, blinking his eyes open, looking confused. Then he saw me. I stood up. I walked over to where the medics were strapping him in. The bailiff stepped forward to stop me, but I held up a hand. I wasn't going to touch him. I just needed to say one thing. Frank looked up at me. His eyes were unfocused, but the hate and the greed was still there, buried under the shock. Beatrice, he croaked, we are family. 2 million. We can fix the house. We can— I looked down at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel fear. I just felt a profound sense of pity for a man so small he had to steal to feel tall. You kicked me out in the middle of the night, I said, my voice steady and loud enough for the whole room to hear. You threw my clothes in the dirt. You told me I was worth nothing. You did it all because you wanted to steal what belonged to me. I leaned in closer. Today, you saw what I am really worth. $2,462,000. It is all mine, Frank, and because of what you did, you will never touch a single dime of it. You lost the money. You lost the house. And you lost your daughter. Frank let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. He reached a hand out toward me, his fingers grasping at the air. Take him away, the judge ordered. The medics wheeled him out. Grayson was led out in handcuffs a moment later, weeping about how it was all a mistake. I turned back to the table. Arthur Sterling was smiling, a genuine, warm smile. He handed me a thick folder. The access codes, he said. The accounts are live. Mr. Hale sends his regards. Thank him for me, I said. Tell him he saved my life. I walked to the back of the courtroom. Ro was standing there, her arms crossed, a rare grin on her face. Evan was beside her, looking at me with a mixture of awe and pride. 2 million, Ro whispered as we walked into the hallway. You are buying lunch. I am buying the whole sandwich shop, I said. We pushed through the double doors and stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The sun had broken through the gray clouds. It was blindingly bright. The city noise washed over us, horns honking, people talking, the sound of construction in the distance. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like freedom. I looked at the folder in my hand. Then I looked at my hands themselves, calloused, scarred, strong. The money was security, yes, but the strength. That was something Frank couldn't give me, and he certainly couldn't take it away. Where to? Evan asked, shielding his eyes from the sun. I looked at the skyline, at the steel skeletons of the buildings rising up, at the future waiting to be built. Forward, I said. We are going forward, and I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to Beatrice's story of justice and resilience. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while working, driving, or relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Veronica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.